Let's go through and identify. Nancy.
Hi, I'm Nancy Bonacera.
Nick Priest.
Carl Foss.
BJ Addison Reed. And Saeed is missing because he had another appointment. So we'll go ahead and get started with the minutes. And Carl, I'm going to let you take over the introduction and proceeding through the documents.
So I had sent late last night copies of the minutes from January 19th and February 2nd. Were there any correction? I know that didn't give much time to review and see if there were any needed changes, but did anyone notice anything that needed to be changed?
I noticed that Nick wasn't on the list of attendees for both of them.
I apologize.
Somehow I didn't catch that. I was too impressed with Carl actually having like quoted us.
Oh yeah, no, that was great.
I
But
was like,
didn't.
this is
Nick
one of
wasn't on the list, and I was like, I'm pretty sure he was there because you're quoted in there.
was there in spirit. You guys just heard me.
Right. I will make that change. And then anything else?
I didn't have anything else. It looks good.
I appreciate
And
Nancy catching that I was MIA. I hadn't caught that. I was so busy on everything else.
Then I move we approve the minutes from January 19th and February 2nd as amended.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. I will send those to the clerk's office.
That was January 19th. You'll do February 2nd?
I did them both in that motion.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we covered.
Yep.
So the next item on the agenda is to review the quarterly report. You have a copy of that. And so I'm going to go through and suggest some things that we might want to take a look at. So, and you have a direction that we're following that begins with page 1. Before we talk about philosophy, I went back to the list of participants and I changed Nancy's name to recognize that she has a doctorate. So I have used Dr. Nancy Marsona, PhD. And I also said DEI committee participant rather than just participant. So I added the title.
Thank you, BJ.
You're welcome. The philosophy statement is new, and it currently reads, collectively, the DEI committee believes that all people who share the planet are diverse, equal, and included in the process to strive toward education, healthcare, housing, jobs and careers, voting, and support from government, military, and the police in the town of Burlington. Given this philosophy, the DEI committee begins to engage in diversity, equity, inclusion for the town. So if there are comments or suggestions,
I don't know if you. Hi, BJ. I don't know if you caught it already, but planet was spelled plant on the version I got.
Well, that's wrong. Thank you.
And the other item is, do we want to include security in that list of items?
We can, yes.
Those are my comments.
I like the philosophy. I know at our last meeting, we'd also talked about including the mission statement that was set forth to us by the select board. I didn't know if we also wanted to include that. Apologies for the extra screaming in the background.
the philosophy really elevates how much we care about people. And oftentimes, an organization forgets the importance of people and they're focused on what is going to bring finances into their organization, whether it's for profit or nonprofit. And so that's why philosophy was added, is that the most important product that we have are the people who are here. And that's why we want to emphasize that. When you talk about the mission statement, that is still part of this document, and we can take a look at that as well. I think it's okay to have both recognized in this report.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that the mission statement showed up someplace later.
Yes, it does.
Okay, great.
Definitions are the same on page 1. Page 2, under the strategy, step 2, meet and suggest to the select board, 1, create a philosophy that all people who reside in the town of Burlington are diverse, equal, and include in education, career service, health service, housing, jobs, and careers, voting and support from police for protection. And 2, amend the select board mission statement to include diversity, equity, inclusion as a principal goal that must be achieved by management, employees, and students, and residents and businesses who reside in the town of Burlington. Any comments?
I don't know if I said this last time. When we talk about businesses, I just want us to be careful about, I guess we could say, governmental overreach in terms of how private businesses conduct themselves. I think from a philosophical standpoint, it definitely makes sense. From a practical enforcement standpoint, I just want to be careful around that.
So what are you suggesting?
That we are just cautious around how we speak about government's role in business. You know, as the government, it's our job to worry about the community. And yes, the businesses here represent a piece of that community, but in a different way than we would individuals. And so I just want to be cautious that we don't make any assumptions that the government has any right to dictate how businesses run themselves.
That's true. The town wants to take a leadership role in our philosophy and our mission, that we believe that people are important to this town. And if they are working in an organization which the select board has control over, then that's where we articulate the meaning of diversity, equity, inclusion. If it's just a business, but not governed by the town, you're addressing that we should not have that as part of the mission statement and the philosophy? Or is it all right the way it's written?
I think when we talk about jobs and careers, we're talking about individual people.
Yes, we
Talk
are.
about business, we're talking about corporate entities. And that I think is where we need to like draw the line and say like we'll talk about jobs and careers as it pertains to the individual. And when we want to refer to things that are run by the town, we can say municipal or municipality to be very clear about that. But I think when we open it up to businesses, the interpretation there is that private organizations or private corporate structures would fall into that purview, and I think that's where government steps out of bounds.
I think the other thing is a lot of these businesses aren't run by Burlington residents or have headquarters in other places. So if we do remove businesses, is that more comfortable or avoids any legal or other
I'd rather,
regulation issues?
I'd
Yeah, I mean,
rather not define it, because if it's a business that is under management by the town, then we should follow the policies and procedures that guide us. If it's a business that is managed by a person who is just living here or has the business here, then they set their own policies and procedures and how it's put into practice or not. So I don't.
then we would just refer to it as the municipality, right? Like I'm trying to think of like a business that the town runs that isn't just the town government.
I can't define that. I don't want to say municipality because that locks it. And I want to be open to make sure that we address a business that's trying to perform here. It may be a resident, but it's not run by the government still controls what goes on in this town. And so if you say municipality, it's only people who are working in a union or have that connection that you're addressing.
Well,
It
no,
makes
because
it too complicated.
we still say jobs and careers, which covers people who are outside of that space, right? In terms of ensuring that we're focusing on the individuals. But again, if we say businesses, now what we're saying is, hey, any other business that's here in town, we're going to tell you what to do. Like there's because we're not going so deep as to look. I think like if in as like a phase two, we wanted to incorporate business by expanding into this notion of having like a, you know, for lack of a better term, a committee that would make up like the Chamber of Commerce and certain representatives and the town to work towards DEI goals. That would be a thing, but I don't think that we're there yet.
We're not, and I think to change this, I would rather have legal counsel look at the wording to make sure we're not offending someone with the statement, but to say that we're not going to include business doesn't reach the goals that we're trying to accomplish here.
What if we somehow modify it to say something like town interactions with business, or the way that the municipality deals with private businesses in which as some sort of way to say that we lead by example. Because I agree with Nick. I mean, I don't think that it's our intent to tell businesses what to do, but there could be people out there who take it that way, and for right or wrong. Um, I think I'd agree that we need to be careful, but I'm not sure what the best way to phrase it is.
Well, and to your point, Carl, like that's what we're saying, right? We're saying, um, that as a principal goal, it must be achieved by, right? And we say as residents and businesses who reside in town, so like we're calling it out. I mean, that's putting everyone from Oracle to True North, on notice that the town is going to regulate how they manage, their diversity, equity, inclusion, and that to me is that to me is an overreach. There's obviously state law and federal law that the businesses have to comply with. And I know a lot of private businesses that have opened their own DEI divisions of HR and are had that focus. I don't think that business that the municipality has the right or the authority to step in there, right? That's where the line needs to be drawn. Um, you know, to again, like I think my delineation is the individual, right, versus the corporate entity. So, if we want to talk about jobs and careers, then DEI and the municipality is here, right? Like we've done tons of job fairs, through COVID. We definitely amped that up and did very Burlington resident specific things. So there's no reason why more of that couldn't occur. But once we cross that that line and say business, I think that we've gone too far.
So I just made a notation to add businesses lead by example and achieve through jobs and careers, something of that nature to change that.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about, I mean, does the town government have any jurisdiction or authority over private businesses anyway? So in that sense, then that wouldn't.
We're leading by example,
That's fine. I think
the
that would
select
be
board.
appropriate.
So yes, I think they do want to focus on this, but say it in a way that's acceptable. I understand what you're saying.
Right.
So that's in step 2 that I would add that.
So sorry, what was the suggested change again?
I just made a notation for jobs and careers as businesses lead by example to achieve diversity, equity, inclusion. I haven't articulated it completely, but that's what I have in notation that I want to add it to step 2.
Okay, I would like if I'm looking at step 2, line 2 must be achieved by management employees and students as well as residents I would strike and businesses who reside in town to improve education, healthcare, housing, jobs and careers, voting suppression and police reform for the town of Burlington. Um, you know,
Got it.
amending the select board mission statement to include diversity, equity, and inclusion, to lead by example as a principal goal. Like we can work it into the current language. I don't think we need like a complete rewrite step 2.
We could use a word like encourage. It's a little bit softer.
Yeah.
As a minor point, if we're going to add security under philosophy, we should probably add it here too. Do you think?
I wrote that down too.
Okay, great.
In step 3, I think I changed the beginning sentence. The DEI committee is committed to engage and support Burlington executive leadership as they create diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, procedures, and practices for every person who participates in any organization. The rest of it remains the same.
When we say in any organization, how, again, same argument, how are we defining that?
I didn't define it. Any organization that the leadership is managing. We're talking about executive leadership in Burlington. So it's the head of whatever that person is in charge of.
So then couldn't we then just put a period after and practices and strike everything from for through organization and maintain the sentiment?
It's omitting leadership. We're just looking for the leader to do something, but not the organization they're managing. That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, through leadership, they're creating policies that everyone would then follow.
Yes, but we don't know the organization. We don't have an organizational chart. We don't know what the program is that they're running for the town. So if you want to provide me with a list of what those organizations are, I can put in, instead of organization, every community or every department or every division that they're running.
Well, when you say, sorry, I've got crying in my ear over here. I apologize.
Who reports into the select board? That's the executive leadership I'm talking about.
Right, and we've talked that there's no singular organization chart in terms of a visualization, but there are lists of departments that report into the select board. But I mean,
We
like
said
I
town
wouldn't call the DPW an organization, right? They're a division of the town of Burlington. So if you're thinking about the municipal structure, right, then anything that falls under the select board would then follow the policies and procedures set by the select board, right? There are no additional organizations as one might define them. The organization is the town of the town government.
Should we say town department or division?
I was thinking the same thing.
Does that exclude everybody that isn't department town?
It exclude, well, so from a governmental standpoint, it excludes anybody who is run by a board that is not the select board, i.e. Carl, school committee, right? It would have to be brought through town meeting to be made a bylaw for it to affect everybody holistically. Otherwise, we'd just be asking like Board of Health, for example, is a department that's run by its own board. Where they would, like, if we set a policy as a select board, the Board of Health would have to then adopt that policy, but not by default do they have to follow it. Same with school committee. They would have to adopt it first for it to then go into effect for their, department. Whereas the DPW falls under the select board directly, and would be directly affected by policy set forth by the select board. So in that way, we could just easily amend executive leadership to say something along the lines of is committed to engage and support Burlington executive leadership or the Burlington Select Board and town meeting, and expand it out to the legislative body. So that way, as things move forward, the door is open to have larger policies created that would then affect all departments across equally.
So you're saying engage and support select board, town meeting? I mean, I think you're narrowing by trying to define who's an executive leader. And you want to expand the definition of organization without my knowing who that is.
Well, when you say executive leadership, my brain goes to the executive branch of our government, right? But what does executive leadership entail? Is that only the town administrator in the office that is governed under the select board, or are we talking about all bodies of government? In which case, it would be any board or committee,
I can't
including,
define
not
that.
limited to.
If I can't define that. If you want to define it, say what it is.
I mean, I could list off every board and committee, but I have to go to the website to get the names. I can give you the big ones, but again, that's I mean,
I would prefer to leave it executive leadership, Burlington executive leadership, just the way it's defined. And if the select board wants to change that, then they can do that. And I don't know the organization, so that's why I use the word organization.
but you said in any organization as opposed to in the organization, which would then tie back to the
I don't
executive
know what
leadership organization.
any or the is.
Well, by saying any, we open the door to things that are not, in fact, government related by saying any organization, because we haven't defined that the organizations that we're talking about are strictly that of the municipality. If we want to say municipal organizations or municipal departments, all municipal boards, committees, and departments, or however, however we want to word that's fine. But organization really isn't a term that's typically used within local government. So then we broaden the scope to all organizations, and that leaves the land of municipality, in my opinion. Which is why I'm trying to, and I apologize because I'm getting hung up on these things. I just want to be very careful that, when this goes in front of the select board, they don't look at it and say, this is an overreach. This is an overreach. We're trying to be inclusive, which I get and appreciate, but I also want to be cautious of the law.
Well,
And
if you want to, if you want to further define this, put it in an email and send it to me. And instead of saying Burlington Executive Leadership, then say what it is you want to say. If you don't want to use participates in organizations, take out the any, just organizations, and you want to define organization, put it in an email to me. And I need to have it in the next 2 days because this needs to go in the first of next week.
Great.
I have no changes on, no, sorry, page 3, step 4. I changed the language here. The DEI committee, you want to take shall out, meets with the select board on a quarterly basis to foster communication between the select board and members of the Burlington community, identify and discuss DEI's ongoing forward movement to achieve goals and results, measure and produce the Burlington Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Scorecard, which displays all efforts and results for the town of Burlington for use on an annual basis, and develop and implement the strategy sustain the town of Burlington Diversity, Equity, Inclusion results, which demonstrates everyone's strength who is connected with this community.
I found a typo, BJ. The
Tell me what it is.
last bullet point, where it says diversity, equity, and inclusion, it says diversify instead of diversity.
Thank you, got it.
Yeah, so the only edit that I had was like my prior edit around shall.
I took that out.
Okay. Would we like to replace it with would like to? Is this a request?
It's a step. And I just said the diversity committee meets with the select board on a quarterly basis.
Right. And I think I mentioned this either at our last meeting or in an email, and I forget which, but because, and this is just a technicality, because the way this committee was formed was that it would be a year-long ad hoc committee that would then report at the end of the year back to the select board. This committee has now suggested that we meet on a more frequent basis. And so that needs to be adjusted in the charge. So even though it's a step, it's also a request, because the select board can say, no, just report back to us at the end of the year. So I want to just be cautious around the language that we choose as a subcommittee to the select board.
The DEI committee would like to meet with the select board on a quarterly basis.
Yeah, or recommends that. You know, I mean, I think that a quarterly update is good. I'm in favor of that. I just want to make sure that, you know, as an advisory committee with a specific charge and mission statement, that we're, you know, making sure that just from a technicality standpoint, that, you know, it's all in alignment.
Okay, I'll put in recommends. Any other changes there? No changes on page 4, none on page 5, page 6. Nancy and I met, and the first thing that we happened to do was to change the title of the top chart, and it's residential statistics for the town of Burlington from 2010 US Census data. And it's comparing Burlington with Boston, Massachusetts, and the United States of America. And again, for reference, the census data is done every 10 years. So the data for 2010 is what we have listed under Burlington.
So the 2020 data wasn't available.
2020 data came out October 2021. That's after this data was created. So you can't use 20, especially when you're looking at the bottom chart, which is the employee statistic and that title for Burlington, 2017, 19, and 21. 17, this is 2010. 19, 2010. 21 was April 2000. So it's looking at the data that came out in October if you're going to use 2020. It's a non-comparison. The only thing we had available every time is the 10 years when it's taken.
I'll speak to that. So when me and BJ spoke, we kind of cleared up some misunderstandings with why she preferred or wanted to use the 2010 data. So in order to compare the employee statistics, she wanted to use data that was already available when those items were collected in 2017, 2019, and 2021. So I agreed with that, and we did this. I do have a note and recommendation here, though. You were asking about the 2020 data, Nick. So rather than add the 2020 data as a comparison to employee data, I think it's useful to include it as a benchmark just to show how diverse the town has become. Because we look at what we, now have for the 2010 data, we see Burlington was 86.8% Caucasian, people of color were 13.2%. The current Burlington 2020 census data, which yes, it did come out after we got the employee data. So we're not gonna, I don't want to compare it to the employee data because that was what we were talking about, that we don't want to compare to future data. But just for information and to frame why this DEI work is so important, we have Caucasian is now 71.5% and people of color 28.5%. So we went from 13.2% people of color to 28.5% people of color. And that's such a huge jump that it really illustrates why this is such important work. And even just as a, anecdotally, I moved here March 2010, and now it's almost been 12 years. I just seen, like, going about town, who my neighbors are. It's gotten so much more diverse. So my recommendation is we include that information, whether we do just Burlington or Burlington, Boston, Massachusetts, and USA. We include that not as a comparison for the employee statistics, but as a informational for why we need to keep doing this work and why this DEI work is important.
Yeah,
When
I mean that's why I am, I would happily advocate for the 2020 data to be included somewhere in this report, because you're right, Nancy. It shows that in 10 years, right, from 13% to almost 30%. That's a huge jump in 10 years. And I think that it lends even more credence to the importance of what we're trying to do here. So whether it be, I mean, I don't care if we include it as an appendix, where it's just like, I mean, but it should be somewhere in here it's worth noting to the select board and the public at large.
This is data that's captured by the way it's been done in the past. This is not where we're going in the future. This is a reflection of what has happened in the past. That's all we're documenting here. Going forward, you put together a diversity scorecard and you measure year by year by year by year, which is what Nancy is suggesting, and you're pointing to that too. That's the future. And so we reserve that and say we've seen some improvements, but the way our really documenting this is to implement the diversity scorecard and measure it every year to see the progress that we're making, or to identify where we're not making progress.
Right. But and again, this is me being a layman to statistics, so bear with me. From 2010 to 2020 is still past data, is it not?
It is, but that's the way it's been done every year. And I can't change the way it's been done every year. And this is a reflection on the past. You're talking about the calculations that we would do now that we have 2020 available. That's for this year coming up.
No, I mean, and again, I'm speaking, and I mean, I'm also speaking as someone on the select board, and how I interpret it is I would love to know where we've come from 2010 to 2020 as a past reflection, and to be able to see that, and then from a census perspective, we won't be able to calculate on a yearly basis. I apologize, I'm getting a visitor. 1 second.
Hello.
Apparently, we're having a pre-bedtime fuss, so we're okay, right? We're good. So because we can't calculate things on a yearly basis on the census data, we have to wait every 10 years. I mean, wouldn't the 2020 data begin to be the initial benchmark that we then move forward from? Yeah.
Coming up in the year, yes. This is a reflection on what we've done in the past.
Yeah, BJ, I agree with that.
And
This is the past
we
data.
can't change that. That's the reality. And we can't say, oh, we've made such a fire in the last year that's what we want to document. That's not how this works. I've done a
Yep.
diversity scorecard since 2009.
That's not what I'm saying, though.
Yeah,
What I'm saying is, like, we should show the town where we've come in the last, what's happened, not what we've done, but just what's happened naturally in the last 10 years.
Yeah, I think outside of a diversity scorecard perspective, just to give context, or as part of the presentation, or even just as separate from this section, just maybe a line. Hey, by the way, this is how diverse we are right now. Because we did get that data from Amy also, so it's not like, oh, we didn't collect that specific set of data for
But it's the
just for
past.
just for Burlington.
It's not today. It's not today before October 2021. On page 7.
Sorry,
it's
so are we, just before we move on, are we including the 2020 data somewhere?
I would not put it in. No.
Okay, well, I mean, I'd like to make a motion that we include it somewhere in the document.
Make a motion for what?
That we include the 2020 data somewhere in the document.
It doesn't belong on the charts that we have.
I
You want to make an appendix?
I don't
Put it in the
care where we put it. I'm making a
we-
motion that we put it somewhere in the document.
Yeah, that would be fine. It doesn't have to be in this section. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. Don't compare it there. This isn't appropriate comparison for data that's from the past. But just for, informational purposes even, and why we even care about DEI efforts, right? If that makes sense. Yeah, I would like for it to just be somewhere, it doesn't have to be in this section.
Let me know where you want to put it. We're on page 7. And what I did with this document, it starts out with the mission statement. It's verbatim what I was given. At the bottom of the page, I removed everything that had to do with the 10 Commandments. And what is there is the Golden Rule, which is the principle of treating other people as one wants to be treated, and the Constitution of the United States of America, with the preamble. Any question about the Golden Rule?
I'm in fact I'm glad that we've changed it. I think the golden rule is a little bit it's more comfortable to my palate. Not that my opinions on it matters. I'm just based on our prior conversation from last meeting. Do I recall correctly somewhere that we had BJ, was it you that had suggested updated bullet to the diversity wow, my words in full sentences today. The select board's mission statement, there was a suggested language to the diversity bullet.
It's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's No,
I'll get to that in just a minute. I just want to fly through the pages. There are no changes on page 8, page 9, page 10. It's all the same. Page 11, there are no changes, but I do want to mention when you're looking at organizational management, that last column, at the very bottom, we have the select board, and that's why the creative ideas. And then 2 is the Burlington Leadership Executives. That's the how with values and strategy. Directors, what? And manage practice applications. Number 4 are managers with goals, decision, action steps, results, and self-appraisal. And then the top is residents and businesses. Did you want to change the word business?
Yeah, based on our prior conversation, I think that we should just stick with residents.
What should it be?
Residents?
This is the government. It is a leadership position. And are you saying that we have no influence over any business in town? We're here for government.
I mean, I can't think of a business that we have control over that would fall into that category.
Okay, I'll take business off.
Should we say town employees or municipal employees?
That's what managers are dealing with.
Oh,
I
sure.
don't know. Yeah,
Yeah, I think that's probably well covered enough in terms of like a town structure standpoint.
what town structure standpoint?
Meaning having managers cover. I mean, even if we want to say managers, employees at that point in the process before we got to residents.
I'll put employee before goals. Maybe. Page 12. You were looking for the draft. And so what I did was to put this as an example. And initially what I did is to put at the beginning sentence, the select board. And at the end of that sentence, the board is to, and a colon, because the way the list was prepared, it had to at the beginning of every sentence. So that was a change. And then I capitalized the beginning of each bullet point. Number 1 was number 5 on the select board list. And I moved it from number 5 to number 1 because the decision that reflects the people who are here is more important. And we wanted to focus on that. And so I said, create a sense of community within the town of Burlington to embrace and engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion so that the soul of the community is to accept who we are and support our efforts to succeed in how we live in the mixed, diverse nature of the town. I just changed some of the words. I don't know whether it's acceptable to you or not, but I wanted to have something that focused on why we're doing this and to bring it to the forefront of what we're managing to do in this town. The other thing that I did is after each statement is made, I put a semicolon until you get to the next to last one where I put in the semicolon and the word and. That's in bold print. The final one is to support a strong economic base through effective land use planning.
I like the wording you did for that, where you moved that bullet point up, and I actually want to get rid of the old wording with so I like what you wrote, but delete so that the soul of the community is, and then also delete mixed, so then it reads, create a sense of community within the town of Burlington, to embrace and engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion, to accept who we are and support our efforts to succeed in how we live in the diverse nature of the town. I don't know, I prefer it that way. Just, yeah, I didn't like those
So
quotation
inclusion
things.
two, and
So-
then take out so the soul of the community.
Yeah.
So it's inclusion to accept.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
And then delete mixed, that quote mixed thing. So it's
I
just
agree.
diverse
The,
nature.
the quotation mix is a bit antiquated.
I don't know who
Not a bit antiquated, it's very antiquated.
writing that was, but it's kind of strange.
I kind of like the idea of keeping like the notion of a soul of a community. They're like just from like a big like philosophical standpoint when we talk about, like people coming together. I don't know. I just
Do
not
we
to say
want
that
to
it's
say spirit of the community then?
yeah, something along those lines.
I
I
feel
think
like
is
soul, and then they put it in quotes, but so not in quotes, but they say the spirit
not in
of the community.
quotes. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Lose the quotes.
yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause quotes
Spirit.
like I saw a thing online that was like quality service, but quality was in quotes, and it's like what what is our like emphasis
Very
to
suspect.
place on a word?
That's not the kind of emphasis.
Yeah, it's like quality service.
Not the right way to emphasize that
Yeah,
one. That's funny.
underlining works just fine, everybody.
Yeah, or bold, yeah.
But yeah, just something around the spirit the spirit of the community. I think is just a
Yeah,
nice.
I like
I don't
that.
know. It's lofty.
So is it inclusion to include the spirit of the community? To include the spirit? Or another word for include, because we have inclusion.
Or instead of soul, just say so that the spirit of the community without quotes.
Yeah, I think
So then
that's
leave that in, but remove the quote soul and replace with just
Got it.
spirit without quotes. Yep. And then delete mixed.
Got it.
And then we can delete that bullet point where it appears again at the bottom, like the unmodified version, the second to last bullet. That was the original format.
Create the severe of the, I can't read that. The sense of community.
Yeah, the one that was the original one.
Take that out.
Yep.
Nick, what's your sense of how the rest of the select board members will react to changing the mission statement?
I mean,
Do you think they'll?
we've been talking about revising these,
Oh, okay, great.
like about a year now, just to kind of make sure that what we're our goals are oriented towards are still in alignment. Like I think one of these is like making sure that like taxes stay low. Essentially, like well, that's important. Like is that like part of our mission statement per se?
Right.
I think generally like keeping taxes low is a smart move for the resident base, but I know, but I'm on the phone though. Okay. But I think like going through this and having a revisional, conversation is good. I think that this is a good suggested amendment to the current mission statement.
Great. I mean, I think they're great, and thank you, BJ, for making all the revisions.
So I'm going to leave draft on this at the top because they need to know we're drafting this. It's not saying take it or leave it. It's
Right.
just to give them a suggestion on how this can be done. And that gives them something to consider in groundwork and will edge them on. Okay, so that's page 12. And then on page 13, which is the bottom, that statement that I have at the top that says it's strategy step 2 is the select board mission statement. That's not in the right place. Because that's what we're continuing to work on. I then changed respectfully submitted and Dr. Nancy, and the title changes. And for Nick, I put down select board vice chair and DEI committee vice chair. I added that to both front and back.
So we
There,
add-
Carl.
Yeah, do you want to add for Carl school committee member then?
I can do that.
Oh, just if we, so everybody has their items in there.
I started to put down teacher, but I didn't know you were the teacher, so I couldn't verify that, so I didn't put that down, but I know you're with the school department. And do you want teacher and school committee? Tell me what to put.
I can just stay Carl Foss. I'm happy with that.
Well, I have DEI secretary.
Sure, that's fine.
And do you want to put school committee, yes or no?
Sure, yes, just to make it official. Yeah, let's do that. Thank you.
Yeah, I like that because then it shows that we had input from multiple.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
As we close out this section, since we were talking about, if we do put the 2020 data in, where to put it, would it make sense to put it after that mission statement draft and before this last part, just as like demographics of town currently for info? Otherwise, my other suggestion is put it in appendix.
Your call.
Nick and Carl, do you have thoughts?
I mean, I'd say just do it as an appendix.
Okay.
Appendix A.
Yeah, so it's informational really, and to give
Yeah.
some context. So
Yeah.
not to like infringe on the other more official data tables.
Right.
That sounds good to me.
So if we're saying an appendix, do we put it in before respectfully submitted, or?
I think page 14 would just say appendix, and then we just list the data. And I mean, Nancy, if you even wanted to put, a sentence or two there that said, for informational purposes or for informational and contextual purposes, this data is being included to show, the town demographic shift from 2010 to 2020. And then I don't know how deep you want to get into the why it wasn't included into the main data set, but I think that just from a contextual standpoint, it'll be helpful.
Yeah. So should I just include like Burlington 2010 and Burlington 2020 next to each other just to not add extra stuff? Because that's really what we're interested in. Just, oh look, Burlington got more diverse. That's really all we're saying.
Keep
Yeah,
it
I think that'd
simple.
be great.
Sounds good.
Okay. Oh, I actually had one really minor item back at page 6 on the data tables. It was just the formatting. If you, I think BJ, you have it as like 0.3, and like 2019 and 2020 have like 0.3, 0.3, 0.3, 0.9, but in the first column it's like 0.3 and 0.8. So just for consistency, either do it as, I think in the census section is a little 0 point for the ones that were less than 1%. So just adding zeros there for consistency and appearance. That was just formatting issue.
So for 2 or more races for Burlington in 2021, that should be what?
Oh, I just was saying formatting wise to be consistent, since in the other columns, when there was a percent that was less than 1, it was 0 point. So make it
You're looking
0.3.
for zeros.
Yes, that's all. That was all it was.
Got it.
So in 2019 and 2022, just those last couple numbers.
Got it.
Great. Thank you.
Okay,
And I will send you the table for the appendix.
great. And I'll put in the suggestions. I just want to make sure that we have this and it's going in as a report, which is a backup to the task already completed. You received well, let's look at the agenda, because the next thing that we want to talk about is the Diversity Scorecard. And that is the document that was submitted to DEI committee members only.
BJ, before we move on to the scorecard, can I just interject with so we prepared the report. You also sent a summary of the presentation, and that meeting is on the 28th. I was assuming that you would be giving the report and presentation, and is there anything you need us to do? Are we doing slides, or are we just going to kind of present the report and go through it?
Well, I'd rather talk about that under number 4 on the
Oh,
list.
okay. I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. All right.
It's on the list. We'll get there. Sure.
Thank you.
And yes, we do need to talk about the document that I sent earlier today, which is the presentation, because we got the email from Lynn, who said we only had 10 minutes.
Yes.
And that came yesterday afternoon at 4:30. It meant I had to go to work this morning and figure out what are we going to say in 10 minutes
Hmm.
to get them where we want them to be. So for the scorecard, this is just an example of what the report looks like. And what I would like to be able to do is submit this to the 5 people who are on the select board so that they can see what this looks like. And if they approve that that Burlington should have a diversity scorecard, then this document provides with guidance on how we might want to put it together. So I think it's important for them to see this as an example of this is where we can take this project.
Yeah, I think this was really interesting to look at. My one thing I was interested in was, in that first section, it says the university, wanted them to reach 20% people of color in student employee populations by fall 2015. So I guess I was wondering how they set that number, and like, would we do something like that for Burlington, and who would do that, or if we would work with the select board to do that. And I mean, obviously we would probably look at town demographics. But I guess I was curious how the university got to that number, if you have any tell us.
Well, I wrote the report and I did it from 2009 through 15. And then, of course, I shared with you I became ill, and 2 people carried it on the year I was ill. So it didn't look like what I did, but at least they got the report out. The 2015 is the document that I created over time, and it's reporting year after year after year the progress you make. And sometimes when you don't succeed, as I
Hmm.
shared with you before, the person who's responsible, that department or that organization, received the copy of the scorecard 1 month before the president did, so that they could verify their own thinking and look at the numbers or look at the policy and how it was avoided, in order to prepare them to have the conversation with the president. And based on that, then they could decide this is what occurred going forward. This is a strategy that I'm going to put in place so that it doesn't happen again. So it's how you guide the organization to focus on what you're really trying to achieve.
Okay, so we're figuring out like a target based on the past history and current situation, and then continuing to evaluate and work on that.
Exactly. And
Okay.
you look at the growth that has happened to say that if we mirror this and we work toward an increase of 2% or 3% or 5%, whatever the town wants to do, you set the goal that's to be achieved in the coming year.
Okay, that makes sense.
And of course, it has to be through the executive leaders who are in charge of each department, school, or division that they're working to lead. And that's part of how their performance will be evaluated in a go-forward basis. But so we do have agreement that we are going to send a copy of this document for the 5 people of the select board so they can review it and see what the outcome can be. Do we have to vote on that or not?
We do have to vote on it, but I have some thoughts. I know, shocking. So when I started going through it, I said, wow, this is a report. This isn't just a scorecard. You know, and it's obviously very in depth. I think to someone who is not familiar with it is going to be very, very disorienting. I then did some research into municipal DEI scorecards that are much more scorecardy. You know, and I wonder if it would. I mean, I'm fine with sharing this with the select board so they have an understanding of what, you know, a robust scorecard can look like. But I also want this committee to discuss what we want in a scorecard from a municipal standpoint and what makes sense in terms of metric tracking. Because I think that when we start saying we want directors to take on another responsibility, we want people to start, you know, that now gets into job roles and responsibilities, and I want to be cautious about what we're asking employees to do, at least as a first measure, because I'm all about taking measured approaches. And, you know, does it make more sense for us to say, you know, that we incorporate some pieces of the scorecard along with, and I will send along in the email to you guys some of the links that I found to other, like I know that the, gosh, where is it? Here it is. That, you know, Arlington uses a scorecard that was initially put together by the Human Rights Campaign Foundation. And this scorecard's also been adopted by, I believe, the state. But there's a templated version. It looks like it's just 2 long pages. And again, it's much more simplified. You know, and I was thinking something like that in conjunction with pieces of this report that could, you know, become our metric of tracking. Because like there was even, you know, a piece in this report that went so far as to talk about, you know, DEI as it relates to vendors. You know, and I don't know how granular we want to get when it comes to tracking. Like, are we just trying to track employees? Are we trying to track what metrics do we want to focus on? Because I don't know that we're going to be able to capture all of it.
I think that's a decision that the select board should make.
Well, again, this is an advisory committee, so they're looking for us to make, you know, a recommendation. So, you know, I think that it falls on this committee to talk it through. And, you know, if we want to come up with our own, or we think that, that, you know, as is the one, BJ, that you have is what you go forward with, whatever our recommendation is, that's what we'd follow, you know, as our recommendation to the select board. But to just put a bunch of stuff in front of them and say, you know, you guys figure it out, I think is us not doing our job as the committee that was stood up to be the advisory committee for this particular issue.
Carl, what's your thought?
The one from Leslie is a bit overwhelming, I would agree. If we take a look at maybe some of the ones that Nick found from Arlington, for example, and I mean, let me ask you this. When we make a recommendation to the select board, is it this committee that then does the research and puts together the scorecard?
I think that's been yet to be determined. I think that should this committee exist beyond the initial year that it's been created for, probably. You know, I think that it would make sense, but beyond that, I think it would fall to the select board and our staff.
Nancy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I can see this being overwhelming, I think, because of the length and the pages of data. If there was a way to maybe just redact or just remove the data, or use that and then a more simple, like what Nick mentioned, the Arlington scorecard or something else as an example. So there's a couple things to look at. I think the length can be off-putting, and then because we are just at the beginning of this journey, whereas with Leslie, it was, several years of work.
The first time it had been done was 2009.
Mhm.
They had never done anything like that before.
I think we're also talking about different scales of an organization, and a different, to Carl's point about like who would own this, right? Moving forward is, this is in and of itself a lot of work, just to put it together, let alone to collect the data. And so if this committee is not moved forward into something of more of a standing committee, then who's going to be now taking on this responsibility? And these are just logistical things that we need to think through. I'm not saying that we shouldn't present it, talk through it, show other versions, and say that we're working through what we think is best for the town of Burlington. Um, but I think that it's a lot, and our resources, I think, are much more finite than a university's. And so I want to be cautious of that as well. Plus, I mean, like our, if you Google it, and again, I'll send you guys the links. Arlington scorecard, like would be a great, like maybe like cover sheet to the scorecard report, right? So it's like, here we are at a glance, and then we break it down a little further by category, or however we, recommend the metrics to be. But I think that, it's incumbent upon us to do that legwork and make that recommendation to the select board, let them react to that, as opposed to just reacting to a series of scorecards or one scorecard and having them either become overwhelmed by it, or, whatever the rationale is, and then just get turned off by the idea of it. If we want it to succeed, we have to, position it in the best light.
I think also to your point about resources, and then also just a university, academia versus, municipal town government. It's like totally different type of environment and organization. So there's going to be differences there, like what the goals are too. I mean, the overall goal, I think, is pretty much the same, but how it's employed and how much resources can be devoted.
My thought is that we should present the diversity scorecard and say, this is an example of what we can produce, and we can choose some of the aspects of this report, or gather additional diversity scorecards from other towns and create what the scorecard should look like. And that could be the focus of the next quarterly meeting that we have with the select board. But I think it's important for them to see how vast it can be, but we can focus where it needs to focus, given that this is a town and what we're trying to do.
I agree. I think that it's worth sharing with them. And I like the idea of it becoming the focus of, the second quarter report. If we're going to share this, I also want to share some of the other options that I came across, so they can
Yes.
see the variety of scorecards, and we can speak to, to your point, BJ, like what we want to include, how we want to make that happen. And, at our next quarterly report, we can present back to you what we think is a solid compilation / recommendation of how the town of Burlington could move forward with something like this, for metric tracking.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that idea. That sounds very reasonable.
Yeah, on one hand, it's the idealized, this is what we could do. I mean, BJ, you say we can present this as what we can do. I'm not trying to be a naysayer, but could we really realistically produce something like that you did at Leslie? I don't know.
The answer is yes.
that on a volunteer basis, or we need a dedicated DEI person in the department?
Well, our dedication is to work with the executive leadership in this organization. That's one-on-one or two-on-one or however the board wants us to do this. That's the communication that we need to have. And if we're going to take this approach, we have the university scorecard. We should look at towns or whatever it is and begin to work on that, because coming up this spring is also the time to work with the executives. And
No, I
that,
agree with that. If we
yeah,
want to look, if we want to hold up the mirror and really truly look at where we are as a town, that type of granular information would be the ideal. But
yeah,
the I think of providing what Nick has found, and whatever any of the rest of us can find, as far as municipal scorecards might be a better, uh, not better, but a more apt comparison for Burlington.
so what you want to do when you're looking at the vehicles is, what are the best models? What do you
Right.
want to take from one town? What do you want to take from another town? What do we want to put that the university might be doing that would really deliver where we want to be?
Yes, that sounds
And
great.
then present that at the quarterly meeting to the select board. Here are two models, not the 3 or the 5 we've looked at, but two models. Choose of the two models what you want to have in this town's scorecard. And that
Well, I
gets
would,
them actively engaged in choosing what's the best approach.
at this upcoming meeting, or
Yes, not this one. It's the quarterly, the
so
second.
at the next quarterly one, I would recommend that we make the compiled scorecard and recommend that to, like, so we can, we'll show them these, and then we'll say we, went through and we've, based on what we think the town should be tracking, and if we need to have other conversations with Amy or Joanne or whoever, put together what we think the scorecard could be and present that to the select board. And then they react to it and, ask questions, ask for modifications, et cetera, et cetera. And that's where that, you know, um, collaboration takes place. Um, I think, putting an a la carte thing in front of them and saying, pick what you want, and then we'll go away and create it, again, defeats the purpose of this committee.
To repeat what I said was two models.
So we would construct two separate models.
And they can then decide what's going to best service the town. It gives them ownership rather than us deciding what's going to serve the town.
Okay.
Okay. So what I will do is to follow up and make sure that they get the presentation document that we're going to talk about next, and the first annual quarterly report. That's in one email. And then the second is the scorecard as an example, only to the 5 members of the select board. Agreed?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's now talk about the draft for the quarterly presentation. And you received that today. And at the top of the page, we have goals, decision, action steps, results, and self-appraisal. That's the process. And then on the left side of the page, each of those areas is dealt with. And we've not looked at this, so I wrote the goal. The town of Burlington must research and implement the strategy to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion for every person who resides, is educated, and works in this community. Any changes? Carl says no.
No,
Nancy, no.
nope.
Okay. Decision. Select board creates a philosophy statement for the town of Burlington. Select board makes a decision for the definitions of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And those are the ones that we approved in a vote by definition. What I did in adding to inclusion, inclusion is defined as addition, enclosure, insertion, and attachment for all people who reside in the town of Burlington for education, healthcare, housing, jobs and careers, voting, and police support and protection.
Do we want to add security like we did in the other document?
Got it.
Yeah, I think any edits that we made to the main document should just carry over to this one.
Yeah. Action steps. 1. Gather written data, analyze, and present the results to the select board first quarterly report herein. So that's the report we just covered. It's attached to this as well. Strategy 2, the select board, 1, creates a philosophy for all people who reside in Burlington, and 2, amend the select board's mission statement to include diversity, equity, and inclusion as a responsibility for everyone who resides and or is conducting business in the town of Burlington. Do you want business taken out?
Please. Unless you, well, yeah, no, that's fine.
So I'm taking out and or is conducting business who resides in Burlington, in the town of Burlington. Step 3, select board requests the Burlington executive leaders engage with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to change policies, procedures, and practices for every person who resides in the town of Burlington and who participates in any business or the organization. Do you want that out?
Yeah, it's good because we removed that from the main one, correct?
So I'll just say who resides in Burlington, period.
Yes.
Strategy step 4. Select board adopts the annual town meeting of Burlington Diversity Scorecard to foster communication between the select board and members of the Burlington community. B, measure and report the results for the diversity scorecard. And C, demonstrate everyone's strength who is connected with the town of Burlington. Results. Annually, the Burlington executive leaders present to the select board goals, decisions, action steps, and results achieved through diversity, equity, and inclusion in the performance of the department and division. Highlight the performance by managers and staff achieved, the successes. Focus on the results that should be shared with the town of Burlington residential people, and recommend a goal effort that should be achieved in the next year.
Is that too specific to the scorecard?
You're reporting what you did in the past year, yes, and what you're going to do for the next year. That's part of the appraisal process.
if this is the report, the presentation of the report, wouldn't step 4 align with step 4 from the report? I mean, it includes the measure and produce the scorecard, but
When you report the results as part of this process, yes, you're looking at the scorecard. So it's a reflection on your contribution to the success through your department, and it's through the management team that leads it and the people who produce it. So
right. No,
anytime,
sorry, go ahead.
anytime you have a goal, you look at the result, the outcome. The fifth step I added, which is self-appraisal, because all of us have to meet the expectation of the manager to whom we perform. If we are not allowed to assess our own appraisal, they may reflect on only what we accomplished in the last 3 months rather than what you did for the last 12 months. So that's why there's a self-appraisal for every person who is employed by Burlington is charged with the responsibility to achieve goals and results. The employee prepares a written self-appraisal document that is given to the manager to assess the performance for the past year. So that's each person's engagement in that process and their contribution. If they don't meet a goal, then they have to explain why. It could be that it was not a goal that was articulated at the beginning of the year, or we didn't have the finances to address the issue, or for some other reason.
Right. No, I understand the fundamentals of the metrics tracking. I guess what my question is that from the standpoint of defining results in the perspective of the report, shouldn't we be speaking to the bigger picture around and including what's there, but also including, you know, policies and procedures updates, the mission statement, like all the things that the report speaks to in terms of encapsulating the proposed outcome result that, the report shows.
Yes, it may
So
be that the executive redefines how they're going to recruit. It may not be a person who has a union contract that specifies and is one approach, but it may be that the director of human resources wants to look at how it's articulated now is that every job that gets posted is done so internally. And then if we don't succeed, then we can post outside the organization. That
sorry,
oftentimes that oftentimes means that you don't have a person of color who is here that can be promoted. And when it's done internally, you don't change the organizational structure to bring in more people of color because it's never posted outside.
BJ, I apologize. I feel like I'm on a different page right now, and I mean that figuratively, not literally. Um, this is
What page
the
are you on?
no, figuratively. Uh, this is the quarterly report presentation, and I feel like everything that you're talking about is specifically tied to the scorecard and metrics tracking of employee data. And what I'm saying is that shouldn't the results section of this presentation be more reflective of the report as a whole and not just the scorecard? And I'm saying that, and hopefully it illuminates the confusion, maybe.
Um, Nick, I'm hearing that you're saying that you think the presentation should be more like a summary of what the report is and our findings or suggestions and recommendations.
Well, like, so up until results,
Mm-hmm.
everything seemed like a summary of the section that it was
Yeah.
kind of coming from,
Yeah.
right? Which made complete sense because, like, if I'm thinking about summarizing this 14-page report into a page. Here's the goal. Here's the decisions. Here are the action steps, right? All nice and neat and summarized. Then we get to results, and results seems very tied to the scorecard as opposed to the overall results of the report, which is that, like we're hoping that there's the consideration of the mission statement update, and we're hoping that, this committee can work with the select board in terms of policies and procedures and things like that. And yes, the tracking of data from an employee standpoint, but like that piece of it, that scorecard and employee tracking is a piece of the overall results of this report. And I feel like we're missing all of those things in terms of a summary.
Okay, so you want the results to not just be that one specific thing, but to kind of, yeah, be analogous to like the action steps, which would make sense. So the results that we kind of expect if they do take, or hope for, if they do take those strategy steps.
So
Yeah.
what language would you change under results?
I would pare down what's there to be a piece of it, right? Because I think that we want to talk about like the creation of the philosophy, and we want to talk about amending the mission state. Like the results are like the um, like Nancy said, almost like the next steps of the action steps, right? They're the summary of the report, and right now it reads as a very specific measurable result tied to the scorecard, which is only a piece of the report. So I don't know what the exact language is at this moment, but I feel like the results need to be a little broader to encapsulate the entirety of the report. And I know that our current report doesn't have a results section, but I think that we could probably, you know, pull from what the report says and what you have here in our action steps to kind of get us to, um, desired outcomes, results.
What we look at under action steps is what this committee is doing, what the board is doing, how we're connecting with leadership in order to achieve it. When you're looking at the results from every goal that's set, diversity, equity, inclusion is one goal. If you're looking at multiple goals that every executive has, he could have 10 goals that he's trying to achieve, not just for diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the process means that you're looking at everything that key executive is responsible for. And it's the results from all of those goals, not just for diversity, equity, and inclusion.
But you're saying from a scorecard perspective.
Yeah, I
That's
think
how it's documented in the scorecard.
Yeah.
I think I see where the difference is. So BJ's saying like what she has written down for results is kind of like the end goal, or like what we want to be able to achieve, that we would be able to have all these metrics that would be provided by these different managers. Whereas Nick, you want something that's higher level, and because we're not there yet, maybe a little bit more in between, like results are we rewrite the mission statement and we start making a scorecard. And so maybe a more like incremental stuff rather than like the last.
Could we have like a short-term result and a longer-term result in some way?
If you look at page 11 of the report, it's the theory strategy for the town of Burlington. Remember, we went over that?
Yep.
And the select board is on the bottom line, but that's on whose shoulders we stand to achieve. And so it's the select board, the leadership executives, directors, managers, and residents in the town. We're all working together to achieve the overall results. Diversity, equity, inclusion is one goal. And everybody should be held accountable for that. But they have other goals that they must achieve on an annual basis. They should evaluate that too.
Yeah, BJ, I actually think the results section might be easier to read or look at if it's instead of just having them as separate statements with semicolons, like do it as bullets. then
Got
it's kind of more clear than you know, if I try to read this and then I kind of get bogged down. But if you put it like that, then it's like, oh, we want to do this, and or these are the results we want or will achieve if we follow through.
So are you saying that executive leaders present to the board bullet point goals,
Yeah.
DEI?
Mm-hmm. Like each of those statements could be a bullet point. Does that make sense? So yeah, the results are that you want the executive leaders to present to the select board their goals, highlight their performance, focus on results, and then recommend goal effort for next year. That way it's more readable, and then it's like, okay, these are 1, 2, 3, 4 results.
Right.
What do you think about that, Nick?
I'm not.
Got it.
You go, Simone. So I think so. I think that my hang up is that, like, when I read the results, to me it has little to do with policies and procedures and everything to do with the scorecard. And if it's supposed to be, if the results are supposed to encapsulate all of everything, it feels like it's very focused on the scorecard and the employees and the goal tracking from that perspective. But like, what is the result that the select board is aiming to achieve, right? Like,
Got it.
So maybe we need more result points, like a couple other ones in addition to what's there.
I had 4.
But I
Goals,
think, oh, sorry.
highlights, focus, and recommended efforts for next year. Those are the 4.
Nick, would you want there to be a couple other bullet points, like, oh, rewrite a new mission statement and, whatever, renewal to commitment for DEI or something like, to that effect, to,
Well, the renewal statement, you're talking about the mission statement? Is that what you're referencing?
yeah, like if we want to end to, like, using a scorecard or, and then that results in, I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas that,
Well, the scorecard is to the select board.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't list that.
Do we
Unless,
want results for select board too? Maybe it should be that the select board should be writing mission statement and making a scorecard.
is
I
that
don't
what
know.
you want?
Maybe, as we've been talking, I keep reading it over and over again to try and see if I can figure out like what my hang up is, because obviously this is like a me issue, and I apologize. Um, I keep getting hung up on in the first from semicolon to semicolon, the end of the first semicolon, which is in the performance of department and division. And I think that what I'm getting hung up on is that the goals, decisions, actions, steps, and results, while those can, yes, I see you. You look wonderful in that skirt and that hat. Thank you. Um, everyone loves avoiding bedtime. When we talk about goals, decisions, actions, steps, and results, yes, we are in part referencing the performance of department and division, but we're also referencing, the executive leadership and the select board's efforts as a part of leadership, for the town, in terms of like all the things that we're talking about, the mission statement, the philosophy, things like that. And I think what I'm getting hung up on is that the way that reads is that it's focused on the performance of the department and division. And then as I read further into the results, we continue talking about the scorecard. And so, like, that bigger picture of the select board's role and effort as leaders of the community, to me, is getting lost.
Okay.
Maybe we shouldn't say performance of department and division. It should just be like as a town or as a community. I don't know. To make it more broad in scope.
Got it. Got it. So what I'm going to do with this draft is that I will rewrite it with the comments that you've made and send it to you again tomorrow. Um,
PJ, so as far as presentation, are you going to put this in slides, or are we just going to go through the document, or I mean, this page?
I was going to
What are
go
you planning?
through it. Excuse me?
Yeah, I was just asking, are you going to put this in slides, or are we just going to go through the page, or
I was
you?
just going to go through the page.
Okay. If you want slides, I can put them together for you, but you know, you're presenting, so you should decide what you want to do. And again, yeah, it's a very limited time frame, so might make sense just to give them this to read and then just go over it.
That's what I was thinking.
Okay.
Nick,
That
are
sounds
you
fine
there?
to me.
Oh, are you there?
I'm currently relocating away from the bedrooms.
Oh, okay. You're walking the halls, huh? I think a page is better.
Yeah, for the purposes of this, I think that's fine.
Because I just want to present the information. I mean, if we only have 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And if there's any discussion after that, then we don't want to
Yes,
use that
that's what
time.
I was thinking.
Yep.
Okay. So my focus, I've got a it'll be afternoon by the time I get this to you because I have a dissertation coach at 9 and an executive call right after that, and then I leave the house. So it'll be afternoon when I send this to you tomorrow to take a look at the one page. So
Okay.
I'll do the presentation tomorrow and try and move that forward. And then on Saturday, any changes that you gave me for the quarterly report, I should have that to you on Saturday.
Okay, I'll try to get that, or I will get that little appendix thing table to you by
Yeah,
tomorrow.
that'll be fine. Yeah, we'll hook that in.
I think that
Okay.
sounds good.
My goal is to get these documents to Lynn by the close of business on Monday. Does that make sense?
So Monday's a holiday.
Yeah,
so
I was just gonna say, wait, it's a
non-offices
holiday,
are
isn't it?
Right.
Oh, that's
Tuesday.
President's Day, Washington's.
Yes.
Yep.
So
Okay,
Tuesday?
then I'll do it for Tuesday.
Okay.
I'll just make sure that we have our communication and get everything in, but Tuesday, let's say noon, Tuesday afternoon. I have class every Tuesday morning from 9 until 12. So I'd like to make sure that this leaves and goes to Lynn ahead of when she said, which was Wednesday. I would rather have it be a day early, an afternoon early.
Okay. Oh, and as far as scorecard things, Nick, you'll send links also? Is that what we decided?
I think you already did.
I did. Yep.
Oh,
So
okay,
she
I
had an
haven't.
email with a. It was a hastily put together. I was just copying links into a Word doc like a savage. So I at least labeled them as like there's like a series of resources and a series of like templates and actual scorecards that I had found.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, the fifth thing we have on our agenda is to determine our next meeting date, which is Wednesday, the 2nd of March at 6.
That's fine.
Make sense?
Yep.
Just 1 second. I may be a pain in the rear end about this. What happens is transportation also meets on Wednesdays. I'm a part of both committees. Yeah, so their next meeting is on 3/2 at 6:30. So Either I can join for the first half hour of our meeting, or hour I can go late to the next meeting, or if this committee wants to entertain not doing it on the second, but again, that's me being selfish, so I'm not going to hold this committee hostage to that.
What do people want to do?
I could do Thursday that week if that's available for people. I think I could also do Tuesday that week, although that would be 2 nights in a row.
Yeah, I
Because
can't
all
do
I'm on-
Tuesday. Thursday would be okay.
We should just confirm with Said before we book a Thursday, just in case
Oh,
his
yeah.
obligation
Right.
is standing.
And as far as getting agenda and posting out, I don't know, I can help out with that if that's needed, or, I don't know, because I
Does
just
that
wanna
fall
avoid-
under my purview as secretary? And if so, I apologize.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, we don't miss the posting next time, because it happened this time. So, I mean, I'm happy to help out if needed, or, I mean, I just happened to check the postings this time.
The posting for Wednesday meetings, has to be sent to the town clerk the afternoon of Monday.
Yes.
That's the 48 hours. If Monday is a holiday, it has to be sent to the town clerk the Friday before
Okay.
1 when they close. They close the office at 1 o'clock on Fridays.
Okay.
Correct. And if we want to, because I mean, the one thing that we can discuss via email is scheduling. So that's fun. But if we want to, like, maybe we can just look ahead at the calendar and try and pick a couple dates. And then what I can do is go into WebEx and just pre-create all of them. And that way we just have them. And that way there's no, wondering where I am with the creation of the WebEx invite. We just have them all set and ready to go and in an email somewhere that we all have access to, so we can get the agendas up and out.
Going back for a second, for the next meeting, do you want to tentatively say the 3rd, pending if Said is available?
Yeah, and honestly, if he's not, and you folks want to put it on the second, I'll come for the first hour or so, and then what I'm in, I'm pretty sure I can make somebody a host. That way, if I leave, the whole thing doesn't come crashing down on us.
If
And
we
then
if
jump to
we
the next one.
leave it the second, we can move the time back to 5:30 instead of 6.
It's a little rough for me picking up the kids.
Yeah, 6 is about as early as I can do.
But again, let's BJ, if you want to put an email out to the group, and that way Saeed can respond, and we can decide if 3-2 or 3-3 works better for the group. And like I said, I'll stay for as long as I can, and then jump to the other one. It's just that was the date they picked at their last meeting, and I don't want to hold this committee hostage over my scheduling.
And then 2 weeks after that is the 16th of March.
That night, economic development is holding a summit from 6 to 8. So that will not work for me.
So maybe we should look at March 3rd, March 17th.
Would it be a pain to bump everything just a week and do March 9th and 23rd?
That's okay with me.
Yeah, that's okay with me.
And I'll create those
I'm also good with
WebEx.
that.
All right. I'll create both of those this weekend. I'll just get them out to the group.
And April is 4-6. and 4/20. Yes?
I'll say yes tentatively.
Yeah, okay, right now.
So just so I have that accurate in the minutes, we're looking at March 9th at 6, March 23rd at 6,
Yes?
April 6th at 6, and
Yes?
April 20th at 6.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is that as far as you want to go?
Yeah,
Because if you want to look at May, we can do that. May 4 and May 18.
No, we should hold off only because we should wait until at least we get May town meeting
Right.
date scheduled and figure that out from there. Because that not only is it, you know, the biggest one, but it's going to go multiple nights for sure.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Bye.
Aye.
Bye.
Night,
Aye.
everybody.
Night.
Good night,
Thank you.
thanks.